welcome to Too Fast, Too Forever. As all kinds of family, we chose this one. This episode 376, the Fast Saga, the Randy Cut. I'm Joey Lewandowski.
I'm Joe, too.
And with us tonight, we have the madman, the twisted mind that gave from the twisted mind of the Randy Cut. We have Randy Carter. Hello, Randy.
Hey, Joe. How are you?
Good. Well, welcome. This is honestly
exciting for us,
you're
man.
Kind of breaking the fourth wall here because, we haven't really had any other listeners on the show, I don't think. But
it was
above
Josh
and beyond.
Josh and Mike this time
they
a little bit.
They paid their way to heaven, though. They paid their way to heaven.
That's true.
I feel very special to be on this podcast. I love your podcast.
Well, thank you.
I love this franchise, obviously.
Joe, maybe we should do more listeners because that's just getting showered with praise like this is wonderful.
This feels nice, yeah.
But I will also say, Randy, you kind of did pay your way to heaven too because you spent if you had the ballpark. Before we talk about what it was, how much time do you think you spent on this?
Oh, I'm curious.
Initially, I spent a couple of full days putting the initial thing together. And then, as you know, I watched it over and over and over again, sometimes scanning through the films, but I was making all these minute changes over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, you would know because I kept sending you revisions after.
Oh, he would update me. It was really fun.
I mean, I probably put, if you just count the time I sat down in the chair and was working on it, a week, 2 weeks.
Your effort is much appreciated, my brother.
Yeah. Oh, it was the most fun I've ever had sitting in an editing chair.
That's awesome to hear.
In a normal movie, because you're an editor by trade, how long does it take you to normally edit if you get hired to edit a movie? How long does that take you?
Well, for the movies that I do, because I do TV movies, 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks.
So this is a third of a real movie, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of it was just watching it back. It's 19 hours long, So yes, I scanned through some of it, but I had to just keep rewatching and rewatching. When I thought I was done, I sat down and I'm going to watch the whole thing to make sure. And I wasn't quite done. There was more to be done.
Well, what was very impressive to me is that as we were watching this in the Discord, very often, a scene would come up and you have specific notes and thoughts and this doesn't really make sense. I can imagine you had a notepad full of these are all the things. I don't understand any of this. We got to talk about it. It's
really interesting that I watched all the films with a different viewpoint because I was all about the continuity and the timeline. All about where, if there's a little flashback, where did that fit in?
Actually, before we go further, how would you describe, because I know how we would describe it, how would you describe what this version of the Fast Saga is?
This is the strictly continuity version. Everything is told in chronological order, virtually without exception. Every flashback is put in the place where it should be. But more than that, because that's not that difficult, the difficult part, or at least the part that was a challenge, which I enjoyed, was making it so it feels like it was meant to be. It's smooth. It's not choppy.
Yep.
I mostly succeeded. There were
I think you did good.
I mostly succeeded. Where if you had never seen this movie before, it felt like these were the right choices and were made. And I just thought that would be such a fun exercise to do. And I've seen these movies so many times. Although I have to tell you, I thought it was going to be much easier than it turned out being. I thought, Well,
I think if you had done this 4 years ago, it would have been pretty easy. If you had done it after 8, it would have been okay, there's some stuff to do. But then 9 and 10 both actively were we need to go back in time. We're aside from the Han stuff, which I got to talk about that because that was crazy. 9 was just here's a whole other timeline. And then 10 is here's a whole other series of events that shape what you saw before. The first 8 are kind of, other than the Han stuff, kind of easy. And then your life got difficult. So we're joking about it, but if 11 does more, we're going to have to do it again when 11 comes out. But if 11 adds another timeline or two, it could get real messy.
It could get very messy. Without question, you would think that 11, if nothing else, is going to show a flashback of how Giselle is still alive, right?
Yep.
So there's going to be that at a minimum, one would think. I thought it was just going to be, the hard part was going to be mixing 7 and Tokyo Drift, which sort of interact. And that was the most amount of choices I had to make. Some are not really choices. It fits here, and you just got to do the mechanics of making it work. Some are like, when does Deckard show up in Owen's hospital bed?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
When did that actually happen? I was doing things. I have notes here. How many days was Sean in Tokyo before Han was killed? I was day by day trying to figure out like how many days these things take place. And
does it happen if I tell you that today is the 7th?
Well, it's so funny watching that. I think I sort of figured that out. I figured out how that works, which is his mother tells him he's arriving on the 8th. He assumes she means the 8th in America because she's kind of a fuck up and doesn't really know what she's talking about.
This is the Joe theory, yes.
Yeah. And so he expects him on the 9th in Tokyo because she's the 8th. But she, for once in her life, was accurate and meant the 8th in Tokyo. And so he arrives on the 8th, and the dad wasn't expecting him until the next day. That all tracks. If you're curious, by the way, it's difficult to know because of the montages and everything, but I estimate Sean was in Tokyo 12 to 14 days before Han is killed.
2 weeks.
He learns drifting well enough to
usurp the
Drift King.
The Drift King and have his best friend of 12 days die.
Well, yeah. Well, the other thing
Life comes at you fast.
Is how long was Han in Tokyo before Sean shows up?
Oh, that's a good question.
It's got to be. You think about it. He's got to get there. He gets recruited by Mr. Nobody. He saves L, but then he also has to ingratiate himself in with DK and the whole Yakuza
and the teenagers.
Yeah, he certainly seemed like he was a well-oiled part of that world by the time Sean shows up. It's got to be minimum 6 months, right? Minimum. Yeah,
and he also, as we see that he said, like, I've never been to Tokyo before. So, like, he's starting from scratch. We have the baseline established that he has to go there and start a whole new trajectory.
That's fine. You can imagine 6 months or even a year between movies. And in fact, if you take the kids' ages into account, which is the first thing I had to throw out, it's the only thing that there's no way to make sense is how quick those kids age. It's like 3 or 4 years in between those two movies because Jack is now in preschool before he was born. But are we trying to say that Owen Shaw was in the hospital bed for 3 or 4 years before Deckard shows up? That seems too long.
Way too long, yeah.
Right. 6 months, maybe? Because
that still seems long.
It seems long, but at the same time, those brothers don't actually talk to each other, so maybe it just took them a while to find out that his brother was in the hospital. And you can see that there are some things that you just have to like hand wave away and just, but these were the choices I was making as I was putting it together.
What was the most surprisingly difficult thing to edit that you didn't expect? And I think you might have even covered this a little bit already. And then what did you expect to be difficult that wound up being not that bad?
The most difficult part ended up being I had to make a decision about what were my rules on flashbacks.
Right.
Because initially my thought was I'm taking every flashback out and putting them where it belongs. And if there are two kinds of flashback, there's a flashback that's new material, meaning the audience has never seen it before, but it's a flashback.
Like the wedding scene.
Like the wedding scene, like Han being surviving, like the whole young Dom
opening. Yeah, the opening. Yep.
Those are all flashbacks that are new to the audience. But then there's flashbacks that are like repurposed footage. Like we've seen it before, but we're flashing back to remind you. For example, when Cypher shows up at Dom's doorstep, there's all these flashes to Elena's death. Just to remind the audience, yeah, this is the woman who killed Elena. And my initial thought was, I'm removing all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it became so difficult because I did a version, and I think I probably sent it to you at one point in time, Joey, where all that was gone, but it was so choppy. And I was like, why am I making this bad just for the being so pedantic about the flashbacks being gone? So ultimately I landed on my rule was if it's new footage, it has to go into chronological order. If it's repurposed footage, it can stay as long as there's no dialogue and it's just quick flashes. So I would remove any dialogue from flashbacks, but I would do the other ones. So that became harder than I thought it would be. I'm not sure what really became easier than I thought. Although I will say the one thing I thought was going to be really, really difficult, and there were a couple times it was, when you remove the flashback and you put it in a chronological order, that's fine. Yeah. You lift it and you drop it where it's supposed to be. But then there's a hole where that flashback was. and you have to fill that hole. And especially if there's dialogue, you have to fill it with. I was stealing reaction shots. Two times in particular. One was Letty's death in 6, when Brian's in prison and he's talking to Braga. I had to actually slow down one shot of Brian just to cover, because Braga had all this dialogue that was over flashbacks that I had moved. And the same thing with Mia's kidnapping in 9. Which one was she kidnapped in? No, 6. The one when she was kidnapped. I took all those kidnap flashes, but there was all that dialogue with Owen Shaw that had to still be there, and I had to find other reaction shots from our gang. And I only have access to whatever's in the actual film. It was fun, though. It was so much fun. But it was like, that was the challenge. Again, to try to make it smooth. So, like, if you've never seen the films, you wouldn't know that there was supposed to be a flashback there.
You killed it on that, brother. You absolutely did.
But it's also funny to see, like, when you drop in Ames... Like, you put the Momoa stuff, you put the Dante stuff in Fast 5 where it's supposed to be. But it's also like, oh, hey, Ames is here, too. He's a bad guy. It's just like, well, hold on. Remember that for 8 hours from now where, like, he's like a good guy.
Well, here's the funny thing. So 2 things. One is I decided I was going to sacrifice sort of storytelling reveals at the altar of continuity, right? So Ames is going to get revealed before he should. Now, when you're telling a story, revealing Ames later was the right way to go when they did just doing this as an exercise in continuity. So when I put Ames earlier, in the Ames reveal after the plane crashes at the end of 10, and he says, and Momoa says, oh, he was always on my side. There was a version where I took out all the flashbacks to Ames, and it just cut to a shot of Ames looking. But then I said to myself, even if this was one film, Ames was 10 hours ago. So a little flashback was okay. I just took out all the dialogue bits that I had put into the Fast 5 portion and just kept a little flash to remind you that he was the guy that was in the office there with Momoa in Fast 5.
I realize now that I did not ask you the most important question is, why did you do this?
Well,
I think you just mentioned, you're like, I did this thing, and like we never really asked why.
It's all your fault, and I'll tell you why.
The figure.
It's always Joey's fault. That's a good answer.
I'm fascinated always by continuity, especially in long-running franchises. I've considered doing this for a couple of other franchises, but this is the only one that it really kind of works. And I decided one time, because I've seen, like you guys, I have seen these movies so many times. I was like, I want to watch them again, but how can I do something different just to mix it up? And I sat down one day and I wrote down on a piece of paper, like, here's how it would be in continuity. Although it became it was much more elaborate once I realized, had it in the editing machine and was cutting it together. It was much more elaborate than I thought. But initially I just had this thing. And on your podcast one time, you guys said, oh, somebody should cut that in order. That would be fun. I wrote in and I said, hey, I kind of did this. I gave you the thing with time codes and everything. And you guys read that email. And it was you, Joe, who was like, oh, dude, you got to do this. You got to do this. I would do it, except I'm not like a guy who does any kind of pirating or anything like that. So I was like, I don't have access to this footage in a way I can edit it. And so it just stayed in the back of my head. And then I was working on a project and I had an assistant editor and we were just talking one day and he said, oh, I have this. And I said, oh, how do you have that? And he goes, well, I ripped the Blu-rays. And I was like, oh, yeah, I do a lot of it at home. And I said, if I gave you like 10 movies, could you rip them for me in a format that I could edit in the Avid? And he was like, sure. So I was like, okay, here you go. And I handed it over to him and I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for real. And then I was committed. And it just so happens, I had about 6 weeks off. I'm rarely out of work, but I had like 6 weeks where I wasn't working, which was perfect. So I was like, I'm going to devote this time to just working on this project.
It could seem like between the time you're like, I might be able to do this, and then like you sent the video files, the first batch. I'm just like, it felt like a week, and I was just like, oh. Like I know, I'm sure it was a little bit more, but it felt like a ridiculously quick turnaround.
Yeah, I was like, okay, you said you're going to do this, and then you're like, okay, yeah, like Joey's like, he already has an outline and stuff. I'm like, holy shit, okay, cool.
I didn't tell you guys I was going to do it for sure until I had the clips in hand. Like, who knows, this assistant editor could come back and be like, oh, I couldn't do it or whatever. And then I'd promised you guys something that I couldn't deliver. So I waited until the clips were in my machine and I was like, okay, I can do this. And then I told you guys I'm going to do it. And then, it might have been a week later before you got the first batches of stuff. It might have been a week.
You did not include Hobbs Shaw, and the way that you described it to me was because you don't know, that never places where it is. So what do you think is the least amount of information? I also don't know that we're ever going to actually, I don't know that they're ever going to like cross back over, but like, what do you think is the least amount of information you could need to pinpoint where that would all go? Because this is 19 hours without Hobbs and Shaw.
Right.
There's going to be another 2.5-hour movie probably coming
at least one
a year or two, right? Like, it's going to get longer, but if they're just like, hey, remember that time that we fought Brixton or whatever? And if they give like a single sentence that places it at a time, like, is that going to be enough to be like, okay, well, I got to put all that in? Like, have you thought about where it could go?
I have, and the answer is yes. I will absolutely do that if it really connects in the entire thing. And I looked for it. There's 2 semi references to Hobbs and Shaw. Mm-hmm. One of them is in Fate when Dom meets up with Queenie in London, and he goes, I thought you were in prison. And she goes, oh, dearie, in and out or whatever, which could be a reference to her being in prison in Hobbs and Shaw.
Oh, good point, yes.
But it also does feel like she's always in prison and always in and out, right?
Well, and the in and out leads you to believe it's not timed anywhere, right?
And also Whataburger is better, but anyway.
So that's not enough. And then I didn't know this, and somebody pointed out to me, because believe it or not, guys, I am not a car guy. I don't know anything about cars.
I'm not either. You know that.
But in 10, when they go to Deckard's little hideout there, and he drives off that car, that little sports car, apparently that's the same car he had in Hobbs and Shaw.
Okay.
I mean, that's what I heard. Somebody else who knows about cars could say, oh, yeah, it was.
So it at least comes before that.
Maybe. I mean, to me, the problem with Hobbs and Shaw is all the technology seems so futuristic. I mean, for God's sake, Brixton's riding like a Transformers motorcycle. It's so futuristic. It just doesn't feel like it's part of the same thing. So, having said that, if they do say, when we fought Brixton or whatever, I will figure out a way to put it in. Although I might do the same thing. The one thing I did in this supercut that was not for continuity, and it wasn't for chronology, it was just for myself, was trimming down that scene in 10 with what's his name? Pete Davidson.
He's not in this cut, is he? Or is he?
Oh, he is. I believe me, I tried to see if I could just cut him out completely. Because that scene
would
really
be for the best. It would have been for the best.
I know. It doesn't do anything. The only problem is there's enough references to it on either side of the scene. I didn't want to get too crazy just for this. So I took out all the things I hated. I took out the fun muffins. I took out the LeBron James powder thing. I took out Tej and Roman actually physically coming to blows. Just didn't sit right with me. Yes,
it feels weird.
They'll snipe at each other all day long. And even maybe it gets more serious where they're really arguing each other. I don't see those two guys coming to physical blows. And that's what happened. So I took that all out. So I did do Hobbs and Shaw. I don't know how other people feel about this. Ryan Reynolds is such an anchor on that movie. I get so tired of him so fast that some of him might get snipped out were I to put Hobbs and Shaw into a supercut.
It'd probably be good. It'd probably be for the best.
But I mean, it would have to be. I mean, I would do it because I mean that's the whole point of this, right? Is to have all the chronology. But I don't know where it takes place or if it's really. I mean, there's an interview with Louis Leterrier. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. And he basically said, I consider Hobbs and Shaw like an Elseworld story. It's not really in our continuity.
Well, if he's making the movies, listen to him, right?
Yes. I think it was the next morning, maybe. So Margaret, my girlfriend, she fell asleep during 7, but she watched from the start through 7. And she said, and this is a thing, a testament to you, really going from one movie to the next made it feel much more breezy. And I think I was like, we also cut out like an hour or more of credits, right? But like going from 4 to 5 was smooth. Like all the smash cuts,
the transitions were excellent down the line.
There's not even a time for your brain to be like, okay, like I can sort of shut off for a little bit here. Like even though we've all seen these movies so many times, except for Margaret, she'd never seen any of them. So this is wild. She's like, well, when is this? Like hearing Joe while drinking trying to explain continuity to her, I'm just like, I'm gonna let him do this because I just want to hear. And he's like, well, this didn't really happen yet, it's gonna happen later, but it's showing now because it's a flashback from later. And she's like, what? It's like, don't worry, like it's fine.
Yeah.
I will. The one thing that you miss a little bit by slamming the movies right together is when there is like supposed to be like a year or 2 years or 3 years in story between the movies. It happens instantaneously in my cut. Whereas in the real world, you got a year or two off, or even if you're watching them in retrospect, you got to take one out of the machine, you put the next one in.
Credits. Yeah.
So, but that's okay.
I will also say, in terms of like that jump, like the jump forward, and I mentioned this in the Discord when it happened, going from feet to 9, from the rooftop to the farmhouse is a jump scare, because it's like music, like we're having a good time, we're having a party, and then it's silent, and it's like rustic nowhere, and it's like a family outside and a car approaches, and it's like, what is, and then it's Roman, but it's like, this is like, it's jarring in a way. Like we talked, seemingly once a lap, we're like, what if they did like a slasher movie? What if it's like crossover, whatever? But like, that was like the first time I'm like, oh, I don't know if I like this. Like, this is like weird.
We even had that kind of reaction when we first saw it in theaters. Because it like pulls up, like, who's this car creeping up on Dom?
It sort of is like that in the actual movie, because it starts with that first flashback of young Dom. His father the car explodes. You're pushing in on his face as he's screaming. And then it is a hard cut to silence, which is one of the reasons I felt comfortable doing that and not having the music fade into it, which was, a choice I could have made. But I was like, no, that hard cut to silence is the way to go.
Like, I like it, but it was also just like, oh, this is like, because in a way, because I think that's also a testament to how smooth the other transitions were, because that's like, oh, no, this is like a thing.
Right.
But it's also, it's spooky, and I liked it.
The easiest transition was 4 to 5. I mean, if you haven't seen those movies, you wouldn't even know that you're on to the next movie.
We cheered you loudly in the room, brother, when it happened. Joey and I were trying to express to Margaret how beautiful this just worked. Yeah. And like, oh, it was so seamless.
The thing about, like, the thing that surprised me most, I think, about this edit is Tokyo Drift became like a 2.5 hour long movie, because so much of 7 was weaved in the Tokyo Drift. Because like you were saying before, how long is Sean in Tokyo? When is Deckard? But it's like all the Deckard stuff with, and after 6, then there. Or like, when is, like, we knew that there was like 4 different movies that have the scenes where Han gets killed, quote unquote killed, and then rescued and whatever, and retcon and blah, blah, blah. But like, there's so much that you chose, I think probably correctly, that takes place during Tokyo Drift. Also the stuff from 9 before that with L.
I backed up from the moment, of course, the moment where we know they're happening at the same time is the phone call, is when Han is killed, and Shaw calls Dom. We know that's taking place at the same time. So you just got to back up from there. And that's why I was doing like, how many days is Sean in Tokyo? And then how many days are we with our team in 7 before that phone call? And try to like mix it in as best we can. I will say that scene of Han getting killed and then not revealed not to be killed, I thought that was going to be more difficult than it was, because there were 4 different films I was pulling.
Yeah.
It came out pretty seamless, I have to say.
Well, it feels like each movie removes a little bit of the previous, because it's like, that's not actually how it happened, and here's some new footage. And the next movie's like, well, that's actually also not really how it happened, here's some new footage. And so it's kind of erasing other stuff, so it kind of makes it a little bit maybe easier in that way.
Although I used almost every shot. There's very few shots in this entire thing that I pulled shots from. That was one moment, though. There was an overhead shot from Tokyo Drift after the car, and you see what we now know is Deckard's car all busted up, and you see people running and pulling a guy out of the driver's seat, like somebody who's injured because he smashed into Han's car. So it's sort of revealed that it's not Deckard. So that shot had to go.
Yeah.
Okay. Things like that. And the other thing I cut out, which is really, next time you guys watch Fast X, in the opening, when they're doing the Fast 5 sort of flashbacks, they have a guy, we're in the police station, with his dad, Hernan Reyes, and a cop rushes in and says in Spanish, they're taking it's subtitled, they're stealing the vault. And then in Fast X, a few shots later, another cop runs into the same room, but with Jason Momoa, and says, they're stealing the vault, with the exact same subtitle.
Oh my God, we would have never caught that.
In the same room. And I was like, wait a minute, guys, they are in the same room, right? Yes, they are. So I just picked one. I had to pick one to use, because they literally did it twice. And it'd be one thing if they did it again in the later film, and so they were sort of repeating a beat, and I was trying to put them together when they shouldn't be together. But they had putting them together in Fast X. Next time you watch it, look at that. It's so crazy.
I love it.
I will say, to answer your question earlier, the thing that I discovered doing this, I have an appreciation for what in the past I considered the lesser films. I think when you put them all as one entity, I have much more, like 4, I have much more of an appreciation for 4 than I used to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even 9 and 10, especially 9, which I know we all have a lot of problems with. I think when you put it all sort of together like this and see it as one whole, it just somehow elevates those a little bit because you're not looking at them as a single entity, maybe.
Well, I will tell you, I think I said this in the Discord, I was looking forward to Turbocharged Prelude in a way that I never have before, because that stinks, but I'm just like, I want to just see how it flows, and it flows pretty nicely.
It's actually a really nice interlude between the movies at that moment. Like, it kind of really works well. Like, as a 2-minute bullshit standalone thing, no. Mm-hmm. But, like, when you're like, oh, it comes right after this. I guess that's how we got here. Perfect. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the goal was to include everything. The other thing, speaking of sort of crazy things that I had to do, when I did Letty's death, initially I just cut, whatever was flashback, because they flashed to it in 4, and then later in 6, they revealed more, which is where you saw the explosion and she fell down the cliff and all that. So that was easy enough. I put that all together.
Well, Margaret was like, she's not dead because we saw that thing. It's like, well, we didn't see that thing really in real life for like another 5 years.
He could have still been dead.
But she also realized very quickly, she's like, oh, they're not dead. We're like, yeah.
That's kind of the whole point. I was like, Margaret, you don't know any of the memes about these movies? She was like, no. I was like, then you're in for a fucking wild ride. Because.
And then she was like, we're like, oh no, like Giselle is dead. She's like, no, she's not. We're like, no, Giselle is dead. And then she's like, no, she's not. And then we're like, well, you're not gonna be awake for 10 anyway. So like, no, she's not.
She's not dead.
But she was for a long time, like we thought she was.
I really like the idea that if Dom doesn't see it, it's not there's no death. Because
that's a really good theory. Yeah,
Vince is dead. Because Dom was standing there with Vince's dead body on his,
Exactly. So Jesse's dead. He holds Jesse, yes.
Right, exactly. But when I did that, Lift That Destiny, I did that, but it just felt like a bunch of flashbacks, right? Because there was just these images and there's no dialogue and anything. And so what I decided to do is later in 4, when Brian and Dom arrive at that little meeting place when they meet up with Phoenix and all that, I stole the beginning of that scene where the cars pull up and they land and everything, so I could put it at the beginning of Letty's scene, just so it felt like a real scene and not just like these quick flashes. And then later, when Brian and Dom show up, I just cut those out, so you can see the car pull up in a close up, and that's all you needed. But I was doing my best to like make everything flow and not seem choppy. That was my goal.
I would make note in the Discord as we were all watching together, which is so fun, that like, oh, like you did a really nice job swinging that. Like sometimes I'm like, oh, I didn't even notice there was an edit there. You're like, that's the goal. Like sometimes, but it's not like you have 15 hours of raw footage for a 2-hour movie. It's like you have this and you can't be like, hey, Justin, can you get me, and Justin Lin, not Justin Lin, but Justin, hey, Justin, can you just get me, like, do we have any extra footage of, like, any reaction shots there? It's like, no, you have what you have, right? So the fact that you're able to do this, like, at all with any kind of semblance of, like, rejiggered constant continuity is amazing.
The hardest part, and I think there's a couple of times, I'll tell you the hardest part was the Han flashback when he's saving Elle. You even pointed it out in the Discord, and you're not wrong, that the music is a little bumpy there. That was always the hardest part, is positioning the music, because music plays underneath these things. And initially, I had that flashback put in chronological order, but with Elle's voiceover. Where my father used to take me out for ice cream or whatever, but I forgot my coat and all that. And then I was just like, that feels so weird, because we haven't met this character before, and now we're hearing her voiceover. So this was the one time I got a friend of mine in, and I tried another way, which is the way that's currently in, where there's no voiceover. And I said, which of these works better, with the voice? And he said, without the voiceover, because it just feels voiceover. So we've completely lost that voiceover, but it's not anything we needed. My parents used to take me out for ice cream, and I forgot my coat, so I went back, and then they get killed. And that was another flashback, talking about for storytelling purposes, when Han's telling a story. In 9, I was like, we got to see the little Project Ares balls again, just to remind the audience that, oh yeah, that was the thing from 6 hours ago that, that he saved Elle for, so just a little reminder. So yeah, there was lots of revisions. I kept going back and back. The last revision I did, it was so funny because for the longest time, part 1, which was the first two movies essentially, had no revisions, if you remember. And then you said to me, "Oh, I'm surprised you haven't had any revisions." And I literally had been thinking about a revision. I said, "Okay, here we go." Which was in Los Bandoleros. Initially, it starts with just a close-up of them in the prison, and they're knocking those sticks together with the music and everything. And then once you're done with that opening sort of rant from Leo, you go to a big establishing shot, and it says Dominican Republic, and it's got the sunset and all that. And I thought to myself, we need to move that to the beginning so that establishes our new location. So I lifted that establishing shot out, put it at the beginning, played the little sticks underneath it, and that was my change in number 1 that I then sent you the new thing. And the hardest part, of course, is I make a little change like that. I didn't have to export, convert, and upload to Vimeo. I mean, that's a 4, 5, 6 hour process right there.
I know it feels like in a different way that you are in this regard, like as much of a perfectionist as I am in other things. It's like, I don't want the people watching or to have this like finished product, even though we're not like sharing it publicly. If you want to watch it, reach out to us how you know. But you don't want to be like, because I know if I did that and there was like one thing in there that I was not happy with, like that's all I could dwell on. I know this isn't good because that one edit wasn't smooth, and I know how to smooth it. I just didn't do it. So like you just you take the 6 hour process.
You're reading my mind. I was doing it, and I was just like, I'd be like going to sleep at night, going, "Oh, remember that? Or what if I did that?" But mainly it was like I'd be driving in my car, and there would have been like some weird flashback that I left in because I was like, well, there isn't really a smooth way to lift it or whatever. This is the best it can be. And I'd be driving, and I'd think, oh, there is a way. There is a way.
You just have to touch your car, just like you would do automatic.
Yeah, you powered up when you were in the car.
There were some crazy ideas I had that I did not do, like because it just didn't make any sense. In Fast 5, when Dom and Brian are like, "Oh, we need a group, we need a team," and they're like, "Oh, we need a chameleon, and we need this." Doing flash forwards to them all arriving in. I considered, guys, this is how insane I am. I considered for a moment, is there a way for me to leave all that voiceover in and then cut to everybody arriving? Because chronologically, that would be correct.
Yeah.
But then I was like, you just sit down.
Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful job. I think every decision you made was the right one. I mean, who knows? But it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful machine. The 19 hours, it genuinely flies by. Also, like, what was weird, I was saying, is that, like, Tokyo Drift feels super long, which, as we do the podcast now, like, doing it after 6 makes it feel short, because it's, like, short movie, long movie, and then short. Here it makes it feel long, but then, once you're through Fate, which is also not the because, again, I've complained about it here, there's not, the Blu-ray does not have the extended cut for whatever reason, but then, like, 9 has lost stuff to earlier, 10 has lost stuff to earlier, which is, like, these are kind of breezier in a way. Like, it makes things longer, but it also makes things shorter, and, like, it's a very strange...
Yeah, because you're not adding, right? You're just moving.
I would not recommend this as a way to watch it for Margaret is a trooper, but, like, for normal people, I mean, if you're listening to this, like, this is the way to watch it. But if you're not, if you're thinking about showing, it's interesting, but it's weird, man.
It is 100% not the way to watch it for the first time. And
right.
So, good luck to, hopefully you'll get a chance to watch them the proper way. I don't know if she ever will, but I will say about 9 and 10, other than lifting out the young Dom stuff and putting it chronologically at the beginning, that was the only change. Oh, and then the Han voiceover thing. That was the only changes to that. So that film played pretty much as is without any internal shuffling around. 10 almost did, again, once you take out the Fast 5 stuff. Other than the, this was another interesting challenge, was the Cypher attack, Momoa attacking Cypher, which played as flashbacks in the original film, and I moved all that up and played it as one complete attack, and then she shows up at Dom's house and tells him about the attack. But I will say in the Discord, I did notice, and maybe it's just because everyone was getting super punchy and tired at the end of the night before. Once we got into the second day and we were doing 9 and 10, the comments became much less about the editing that I was doing, maybe because there was less of it, and much more about how the films weren't making any sense.
Well, I also think that, like, that's just, they're movies that are easier to sort of pick at a little bit. And also, I think, like what you were saying earlier, like, all of the interesting edits you had made had moved stuff earlier. And so this was just like watching things, like, I noted that with moving the flashbacks and the alternate timeline and whatever, where they're supposed to go, These just become like unambitious movies that are just like cars blowing things up. It's just like, well,
it's really interesting that you pointed out, and you're absolutely right, and I'd never considered it. If you remove the young Dom stuff from F9 becomes like less interesting of a movie, and you can't bust on the filmmakers that way. They did include the young Dom. That's the way they intended that film to be seen. The other thing I'll say that I discovered, and I sort of knew this, but I really did Mia is so underserved in this series.
Oh, we know.
If you take all the scenes that she's in, it's literally like 2 hours out of 19 hours. She's in 2, if you count scenes that she's in, because so many of the film she's not part of the action. Other than 5, she's gloriously all throughout 5.
Yep. Which is why it's the best movie.
That's right. That is right. Mia is my favorite character.
Me too. Speaking of, do you want to find out which Fast and Furious character you are?
Oh.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Rare privilege for listeners. Here we go. You know the character quiz, 7 questions, 6 multiple choice answers.
I'm sure you've heard this once before.
Randy, how fast are you? NASCAR, roller coaster, Lamborghini Murcielago, Toyota Prius, Vespa, or Razor scooter?
Roller coaster.
How furious are you? The Hulk, Kylo Ren, Christian Bale on that one movie set that one time, Mel Gibson, Charlie Brown, or Jack McBrayer?
Charlie Brown.
We're having a barbecue. How are you helping? Are you on the grill, saying grace, kicking back with a beer, babysitting, being the entertainment, or sneaking a snack?
I am sneaking a snack.
We've got time to kill, or you've got time to kill. What are you doing? Grabbing a bite, working on your car, hanging with friends, drinking a beer, working out, or doing work on your computer?
Hanging with friends.
Describe your wedding. I'm never getting married. It's me and my partner. It's us and our families. It's a backyard country affair. Everyone I know is there. I don't remember.
It's me and my partner.
You just won the lottery. What are you buying? My own garage, a private plane. I'm gambling it all away. My childhood home, a fleet of cars, or a new life.
My childhood home.
What is your drink of choice? Belgian ale, Corona, something fruity, water, whatever's cheapest, or just one of whatever you're having?
It's got to be Corona, right? It's got to be Corona.
Well, those last two really cemented who you are. You are Dominic Toretto. Your stoic attitude is intimidating. Your cool demeanor under pressure is inspiring. And your expertise under the hood is envied. But all these pale in comparison to your loyalty to your family. You may claim to live your life a quarter mile at a time, but there's nothing you wouldn't do for the people in your life. And at the end of the day, nothing makes you happier than throwing something on the grill and sharing a few Coronas with your familia. And you drive like the wind blows.
Well, I am the same age as Vin Diesel, so I think that works out.
Vin Diesel or Mark Sinclair? Because that's it.
When was Vin born?
1967.
No, when was Vin born? Mark was born in 67. Oh. Vin was born in the 90s, maybe?
89? When did he do that multifacial?
Multifacial thing was like 85, maybe?
Wasn't he Vin then?
No, I think it was Mark Sinclair in that one.
Okay, fair.
I think. I don't remember, though.
Multifacial came out in 95. He was Vin in that, so it was at least...
Oh, so 85. Okay, so he was Vin in that.
No, 95. Did you say 95 or 85?
95. I thought it was 85, but it was 95. Vin Diesel, uncredited in 1990 film Awakenings.
So it doesn't count if he's not credited.
Right.
Diesel's stage name came from his time working as a bouncer at the New York nightclub Tunnel, where he wanted a tougher name for his job. Vin came from his mother's married last name, Vincent. And Diesel came from his friends because of his energetic nature. Who knows? Now, Randy, my last question for you. You mentioned earlier you had a newfound appreciation and respect for 4. Did you update rankings you want to give us? Because you have rankings through Fast 10. You have emailed those in before. But you have updated rankings. You don't have to give them now. You can also email them in later to do it later if you want. But do you have new rankings?
I got to rethink. I'm not sure they changed that much. I just think I just appreciate the ones that are at the bottom of my list. More. I mean, like you say, always say they're all 10 out of 10. It's just a matter. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of like which one is higher than the other. The best of the best.
Yes, of course.
Brother, I just want to gush though because like you did an excellent fucking job, Everybody was so excited for it. I passed it off to a couple of my buddies. You saw they joined the Discord and they were chatty. I had another buddy that was watching along but not in the Discord. We all had such a great time. I pitched to Joey I would like to make this an annual tradition. I think it would be fun if we continue it, and if you continue to add on the movies, we'll continue to watch it for even longer. And that all of it was a delight. You did such a good job. We appreciate your hard work and dedication, and thank you for doing something that we love now and was not in the world before, that your brain put it in the world for us. So I thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on. This has been fantastic. And I absolutely will be adding with 11 and Hobbs and Shaw if it comes back in, and whatever else comes down the road, including, as I said, the Fast and Furious, the next generation, which I think is what's coming up after.
I do too.
And just to a final thing, if I may, the thing was the fact that I cut out the ending of Furious 7, the drive.
You did. And
I did it for a very specific reason. To me, even when I first saw it in the theater, and I saw it at a special screening that Vin was hosting, well, my friend and I, who I see all these movies, we walked out, and we both agreed that ending, that's not Dom saying goodbye to Brian. That's Vin saying goodbye to Paul. Mm-hmm. In the context of this 19-hour film, it just didn't fit. Even the beach scene I considered, but I was like, maybe you could argue that that's them saying goodbye to Brian because he's retiring from the life. But the whole drive and you'll always be my brother. But believe me, it's one of the best parts of the series. I tear up every time I see it. I'm like a puddle on the floor. But it just didn't fit this.
Oh, actually, speaking of, and this will be the last question, how did you choose what scenes to pick for your own self-made credits, which were amazing? Set 2, we own it, but you put them in full franchise order with a lot of withs, ands, proper crediting. How'd you choose what to do for that?
Well, the opening credits to 6 are my favorite. That's my favorite song. So I just laid that.
Everyone loves them but Heather. Heather's the only fool who doesn't love them.
Yes.
Listen, everyone has their own opinions. Some of them.
And hers is wrong.
So I laid that as my template. So even the credits coming in from the side and everything is based on that. The order of the credits are literally what they are in the film. I'm a big credit watcher. I could list the credits of every film. And, you want to talk about me. Jordana Brewster, whose fourth build at the beginning, is now underneath Sung Kang for,
Yeah.
Nathalie Emmanuel is higher credited than Jordana Brewster. They do my girl wrong every time. But anyway, so I did that. And then picking the shots, some of them were from the opening credits of 6 that I saw cool shots. But otherwise, literally, I'd be like, okay, it's time for, Ludacris. Let me just go through. What are the cool shots? Some of them are just from my memory. And I'm like, let's go find that shot because it's so cool. And I knew I wanted at least one shot from each film. And so I'd go to the film and find, what's a cool shot? And I just cut it together. It was, so much fun doing that.
It was super cool. So thank you once again for doing all the work, all the revisions, all of the tireless efforts to make this a thing.
Greatly appreciate
Thank you for joining us tonight and sharing about it. Our next episode, if you're listening out there, is Life in the Fast Lane number 34.
Ooh.
We've already recorded that, so if you're going to get an email and get it, we'll get it in for the next lap. After that is going to be the tune-up. If you're a patron, the next bonus episode you will hear is Randy's pick of The Breakfast Club, so go join at toofast2forever.com.
Yep.
For all things Too Fast, Too Forever, go to cageclub.me, facebook.com/toofast2forever, or at toofast2forever on all the socials. Email us, family@cageclub.me. Check out our Patreon page at toofast2forever.com and our store at cageclub.me/shop. And come back next week for Life in the Fast Lane. I'm Joey Lewandowski.
I'm Joe, too.
And that was Randy Carter, and we will tell you all about it
when we see you again.